Hello and welcome to South Africa on 99.94 Cricket Every Day. I'm Neil Manthorpe and my co-host is Lungani Zama. In this episode, we'll be talking about South Africa's fixtures in the T20 World Cup and how they might go. We're going to do a little bit of experimentation and we're not afraid to end up with egg on our faces. We're not going to make any predictions. We're just going to have a little bit of fun and talk about the games that South Africa have got. First thing to say is that it's not an easy trip from India to Australia. I don't think it's an easy trip from anywhere apart from New Zealand to Australia. And South Africa will be playing their first warm-up game, the first of two warm-up games, something like 4.5 days after arriving in Australia. I've been to Australia many times. I can't get out of bed for the first 4.5 days. You're wide awake in the middle of the night, so and asleep during the day. So they've got some rapid acclimatizing to do. But their first actual game in the group stage in the Super 12 is just over 10 days after their arrival in Australia. We did see, Zams, that how negatively they were affected when they went for the Test series in New Zealand, because they were half asleep in the first Test match. They were in strict quarantine for 10 days. Anyway, assuming that they recover from that reasonably well. Actually, just rewind. I mean, every other team is going to have arrived in Australia and played games before they have. And we spoke about the fact they had to stay back and play in an ODI series. There's going to have to be some serious uplifting of the morale and lots of sleeping tablets and things. I just, in my experience, like if you're the last to arrive for a party, like everyone's having fun and you're a bit down.
Yeah, definitely last to arrive for a party, and they had to honor a previous engagement to a party that I bet they wish they hadn't gone, actually, because the way that they've played in India for both their form and their mental wellness, so to speak, it's taken a dent, and now you know that you're trying to play catch up to everybody else. There'll definitely be no shortage of motivation when they get to Australia to prove some points, but it's not a long time to acclimatize and sort of shift from the disappointment of losing a series to ostensibly India's B side, to then fronting up to a World Cup with teams who've been there longer. That opening game you spoke about is going to be tricky because it's a free hit for one of the qualifiers to take on a South African team that's low on confidence, with a few potential selection headaches before the game. It really is an Ireland, or did you say it was Ireland or Zimbabwe that's going to play them in that first game? It's a complete free hit for those two countries because you literally expect it to lose. But if South Africa are under the cosh early, we've seen what Ireland can do. So yeah, there's not a lot of time for South Africa to sort of lick their wounds. They've got to get to Australia, reset both their body clocks and their attitude, and get into World Cup mode.
I just want to be fair to Group B. So South Africa's first game is in Hobart, and it's the winner of Group B. So West Indies or Zimbabwe, I said, but it could be Scotland or Ireland as well. They finished their group, by the way, with a game against the team that finishes second in Group A. And once again, I have suggested that might be Sri Lanka it's Sri Lanka, Namibia, UAE, Netherlands. Anyway, okay, so let's have a look at that first game then. If it is West Indies, Zimbabwe. Okay, it's West Indies, right? So no.
Yeah.
Yes, B1. Okay, West Indies won. So we're just having a bit of fun here. And you know what? If it sounds like a prediction and we get it right, then excellent. But more often than not, we'll get them wrong. But okay, so if it's that you need to win the opening game against the West Indies, they've made some interesting selections, haven't they? No Andre Russell there, and no Shimron Hetmeyer, of course, having missed his rearranged flight, and no Sunil Narain because the selectors didn't know if he wanted to play for them. As the usual West Indies selection kerfuffle. It's at Hobart, so yeah, quite a small ground. What could go right and wrong for South Africa?
Well, the one thing that could go right for South Africa is that West Indies don't turn up because they've got their own problems, like you say. I mean, I'm still baffled. I saw a lot of memes about Shimron Hetmeyer dangling on the side of an aeroplane, trying desperately to catch up with the team bus. Like, it's just bizarre in this modern age that an international superstar just misses a flight and then can't just jump on a private jet almost, given all the money that he's made around the world, and meets the team there, you know. But anyway, the West Indies got their own complications, but that's probably when they're most dangerous, when backs against the wall and they're just swinging freely. And that will be the danger that lurks for South Africa, because they know that a wounded West Indies kind of plays with a carelessness that can sort of take games away quite quickly. And then obviously South Africa, especially with ball in hand, have structure and routine and plans in place that are not as adaptable as other teams. You know, there's a couple up front, there's a spinner who normally opens, there's KG comes on a couple of overs into the power play. You know who's going to finish. So you can kind of line them up. And if they get off to a flyer and they kind of disrupt the best laid plans, things can unravel pretty quickly. So it is an early test of nerve, really, because you just don't know what you're going to get against the West Indies, but you've got to turn up yourself and play your best cricket.
Okay, I think South Africa will cope with the West Indies. For some strange reason, I've got more concern about the second game against Bangladesh at the SCG. Now, the SCG has a reputation, obviously, for being very spin-friendly, but that's normally on days 4 and 5 of a Test match. So, but it does turn. I mean, you know, it'll be a fresh wicket presumably at the beginning of the tournament. But Bangladesh in Sydney is the second game. No problem for you? Shakib Al Hasan and his band of left-arm spinners.
Yeah, I mean, South African top order is half left-handers anyway, so all those left-arm spinners are turning it in, and you would say straight into the slog sweep zone of Quinny and Riley and David Miller. But the way that they played in South Africa has given them, you know, a lot of confidence in looking ahead at that game and saying, that's one to beat South Africa, because we've shown that we can beat them in their own backyard. So the conditions are not the issue. Again, it's how do you cope with a few early wickets if you're South Africa? We know exactly what happened when they played Bangladesh in 2019 World Cup in a game at the Oval that we expected South Africa to win and kick off their campaign properly after losing to England. And once they lost that game, that really was the beginning of the end of their World Cup plans. So they do have that in the last time they played Bangladesh in a serious World Cup game. That's, you know, that stays in the back of your mind. There's still enough players on both sides to remember just how quickly that unraveled at the Oval.
Okay, we'll take a short break here and come back with. Well, I think so. Are we agreeing that South Africa are going to win the first two games on basis of probability? We can see the problems, but we're not putting them down for a loss.
Yes, on the balance of probability, yes. Or the balance of optimism, yes. I'd love to see what the West Indian podcast says about the same thing.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we'll be back in a moment with games 3 and 4.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Right, the big one, Zams, is Game 3 against India in Perth in that massive, massive stadium. And, it'll I can't remember the name of it now. It's got a new sponsor, hasn't it? I'm sure you remember it. But that massive, incredible, wonderful new stadium, India in Perth, and it's always a huge game. How do you see that one going?
Probably the best stadium to play India for South Africa. So that, could have easily been at Sydney, where it almost becomes a home game for India, and more favourable conditions. The Wacker should fly a bit, and as much as India have got a very good attack themselves, pace-wise, you think South Africa hold the upper hand.
Sam, it's not at the Wacker. It's at the
It's
what's
at
the new
one.
stadium?
Yes, it's at the
new
stadium.
one. Yeah.
In Perth, you would think it's South Africa's best chance, because it's taken away from one of the major centres in Australia where India would have a really strong sort of almost home crowd. I'm sure they'll still get a lot of support, but it's a place where you can sort of hit through the line of the ball. And Miller's had a lot of decent innings in Australia where you literally just hit through the ball because you can trust the bounce. Rousseau's much the same. Of course, on the other side, Kohli and Rishabh Pant will do exactly the same themselves. But you'd like to think that that's their best chance to do it. And it probably almost becomes a must-win game if they've slipped up in one of the early ones, because you don't want to leave too much at the back end, because that's what happened in the last T20 World Cup. You'd hope that the bowlers are sort of given the license to be a bit intimidating and let a few fly, because you're not gonna beat India by spin. You're gonna bully them with fast bowling, hostile fast bowling and aggressive stroke play. So you hope that they lean on those hallmarks and trust their skill sets to get them over the line. Because if you can beat India in that game, you really, really start feeling that a lot of things are possible.
Yeah, I have a big concern. I think that there's some scarring, in recent results. So I think out of the 5 games, I'm thinking you can possibly afford to lose one, not too badly, and still make the semi-finals. But that's interesting. Okay, right. Pakistan in Sydney. Now then, we're a couple of weeks into the tournament. The SCG is drying out. The square's a bit drier. The spinners are getting some real purchase, and so South Africa take on Pakistan in their 4th game.
I think this is a tougher game than India. And the stakes will be a lot higher in this, because the end is in sight. Either way, you either really looking forward to the knockouts, or you're almost packing your bags. And Pakistan are just such a well-balanced team, and they, as much as they've got a reputation for being frantic, they play with a lot more composure these days, and they don't just build up the India game as their must-win. They know that they've got the skill and the power to beat India, and they've done it often in recent years. So I think they are a more polished outfit. They're a more balanced team, and they pose a far bigger threat to South Africa because they love the ball coming onto the bat. That top order of theirs, the faster you bowl it, the more they relish, the prospect. And you back over length, they play with absolute fearlessness. So I see bigger problems here for South Africa, and that new ball pairing of Pakistan's as well. It's going to ask serious questions, right hand and left hand. It's a really, really good team. They're one of my favorites for the tournament, just because they know how to play this format, and they've got such quality players who are at the absolute peak of their powers.
Right, time for our final break in this episode. When we come back, we'll talk about South Africa's final games and then the prospect of semi-finals and final.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Sams, the final game is against possibly West Indies or Sri Lanka, and South Africa need to win. They're a little bit behind on net run rate, and they need to win big. And that game is in Adelaide. How do you see it going?
Yeah, you hope it doesn't come down to that, but when you play and you know that you've got to sort of win in 14 and a half overs as opposed to the 20, it just adds so much more complexity to the task at hand, because whichever team you're playing against is a strong team in itself, and they know that you're not playing them. I mean, England literally were playing to not lose, just not lose too badly when South Africa got knocked out of the last T20 World Cup, which is a deflating thing because it was a marvelous performance. Markram batted well, but it's too late to adopt that attitude. So you hope that they don't take that approach where they just try and do enough. You've got to kind of demolish teams early so that you build up a buffer of net run rate, so that when it comes to the end, just winning is enough. You don't have to add this other calculation into it. And Mark Boucher and the rest of the South Africans have been known to not be so clever with the calculations under pressure. You don't need it, in all seriousness. You don't need to be mathematical equations. Just win and you're through. So make sure that when you get the opportunity to win games early, you do so. Don't coast home. Finish with a flourish and know that you're playing a league in the first half of this tournament. So you've got to, be a bit like Man City and get goal difference right up there, because when it comes down to it, you're too far ahead. It will be a tight group. India, Pakistan in the same group. West Indies. It's a tough group when you look at it. So it's going to come down to run rate probably, because people will beat each other. So you've got to make sure that when you win well.
Run rate kind of defines the mentality and the approach of teams in cricket, doesn't it? Because you have those teams that are winning anyway, and then kick on and just win with 3 or 4 overs to spare when they could have coasted home. And again, over time, over history, I've heard so many South African coaches and captains have said, well, if we just win, if we win all our games, run rate won't matter. And they're all dear, wonderful people, but it, you just over the last 25 years, I've wanted to say, but it might matter. Take it seriously. Don't take this conservative route and thought process.
I think it is such an unnecessarily conservative approach, and it's come back to bite South Africa again and again, because it's all well and good saying if you win all your matches, you're not. You're gonna have to play out your boots to beat India, Pakistan, West Indies, and probably someone like Sri Lanka, all in the space of a week, 10 days. There will be a slip up. So when you do win and you're on top, you've got to make sure that you win well enough, because this group looks like one team might sort of win all their matches, and the others, the second qualifier might be somebody who doesn't lose as badly to the first team, but beats the others convincingly enough. It's going to be a bun fight. So when you do have the opportunity, you've got to trample opposition. You look back to the great Australian side. They were never satisfied at sort of chasing 350 overs at 6 and over. They'd rather chase it in 40 overs and score at 8 and over and just really take the game away. And that sets you on your way in a tournament in the group stages when you can do that. But it also just really lets the rest of the tournament kind of look and go, jeepers. You don't want to run into them, because they look imperious. They're not plodding along and just getting by. They are in top gear, and it's an attitude. And you hope South Africa learn from getting close and losing because of run rate last time, and play with the right attitude all the way through this tournament.
Right. And finally, I'd like your 4 semi-finalists, but I'd like 2 versions of it. I'd like your 4 semi-finalists from the head, and then your 4 from the heart.
I've learned to take head first. Whoa, let me say that again. You'll have to edit that as well, AJ. My four semi-finalists. Realistically, I would say Australia at home for sure, and England just bat so deep and play with such assurance that you would think they'd be in the mix as well. And then in the second group, I can't look past Pakistan. And given South Africa's inconsistency of late, you'd probably think India ahead of South Africa. So those would be my 4 semi-finalists. England, Australia.
That's from the head. Now from the heart?
That's from the head. From the heart.
And I know I'm not just saying include South Africa. I'm saying who would you... What's your romantic semi-final lineup?
Romantically, I'd love to see Pakistan and South Africa both topple India and get through. Because I think it would be wonderful for the game and wonderful for both countries because they need the fillip. And on the other side, I still can't look past Australia and the way that they played. But I would love New Zealand to be in the semi-finals as well because they always seem to find a way, and I wouldn't discount them that easily.
Of course New Zealand will be there. Of course they will. They always find a way. They are perennial semi-finalists. New Zealand will be there.
Okay, well, so New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Pakistan, inshallah.
Right. Well, all I will say in conclusion is that my heart has South Africa in the semi-finals, but my head doesn't. And I hope that my head's wrong.
That's exactly what I said, just not with the same eloquence. That's what I said, that my heart says I'd love South Africa there, but my head says they're too inconsistent. But anyway, we'll soon see.
I tell you what, if South Africa, if they pick all those batsmen, then and they can score 220 every game, then they'll make the semi-finals and they could even win the tournament. Okay, until next time, thank you very much indeed for listening to South Africa on 99.94, where we speak cricket every day, or at least every day that we can find the time to do so. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcasts. You can download the 99.94 app and follow us on Twitter at Neil Manthorpe and Whamzam17. Never miss out. Join our 24/7 conversation on social media and follow us at 9994DM. Cricket every day, your way.